Good evening, everybody. I just wanted to make this quick video. A customer of mine called or emailed me just before I was wrapping up for the day, and they asked me if we could help come up with a solution to protect against this Zoom vulnerability, and they sent me on the article. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how you can protect yourself from this vulnerability, but not just how you can protect yourself from this vulnerability, but really how you should be approaching security in general. Well, it's great that MSPs and businesses are out there, they're looking at vulnerabilities and they're chasing them down, and they're making sure they're asking the questions, how can I deal with this? The problem is the vulnerabilities that are going to bite you in the backside aren't the vulnerabilities that are posted on the media, that they're much smaller and less known about vulnerabilities. But needless to say, we'll talk a little bit about this one first. So I was sent this article on Bleeping Computer. I'm just going to pull it up now for you, which essentially says that an attacker can send a UNC link in Zoom, and using that UNC link they can, maybe to an image, they can essentially harvest your Windows credentials. So the first thing is, if we have a look at this, and I'll just bring it up on the machine, it essentially says they're going to send a link that looks like this, and when they click on that link, it's going to send in the Windows credentials, and those credentials can be harvested. And the question was, how can we, with storage policies and ring fencing, stop this from happening? So I have my Zoom account open here. I don't have it ring fenced. I'm just going to join my meeting. So I already had joined a meeting, but there you go, I have joined a meeting. And I'm going to send a message just to show you how essentially this works. And it might seem very, very harmless at the front end. I essentially can send a message here, so I'll send one to demo PC4. I'm just going to send a loop back, share, and we'll call it test.jpg. I can find my Zoom chat. When the user gets this message, they click on it and it opens the photo. So that's the first part of this. When they do that, the credentials, the NTLM credentials, are essentially passed on to the attacker. What's a little bit more concerning than that, which is what that isn't mentioned here and wasn't asked of me, is if they can do that, they can essentially send you a payload, an executable, a batch file, a script file to run in the same manner. So in this case, we could essentially say, I'm going to send, and I'm just going to use localhost as an example, localhost.exe, and I'll use a Windows command, so I'll pick something like calculator. They could send this UNC to a server that's hosting malware, and when the user clicks on that malware can essentially open. Now, I know when we look at this, we see localhost, we see $, this is fine, you wouldn't expect this, but equally you can set up an SMB share on the internet, port 139 wide open, and allow somebody to UNC to that share without any credentials, open it as a guest, and you can put something on there. And when the user clicks on that application is going to open. So there's a few things you can do to protect yourself against from this. First of all, we do have a ring fencing policy that is a suggested policy specifically for Zoom. And what this is going to protect you from is a few things. One is it's going to stop Zoom accessing your files that it doesn't need to access. So you can go into the portal here, you can go into add suggested policies, and you can simply, and I'm going to make my screen a little bit bigger, you can simply say, I want to add this policy, and what it's going to do is it's going to say Zoom can run in my environment, but there's two things it's not allowed to do. One is interact with other applications. So whether you're using application whitelisting or not, Zoom isn't going to be able to open applications. This is going to protect you in two ways. One is it's going to stop Zoom launching applications on your system that can potentially be used against you. So they're not going to be able to launch PowerShell or RegServe or Run DLL or any of those weaponizable applications on your system, even if they're on the whitelist, even if they're trusted, even if they're not malware. Secondly, if they do send you, if somebody does send you a link to malware, if somebody does send you a UNC2 ransomware sitting on the server, it's not going to be able to open that either. Now, I will say that you should also combine this with the whitelisting, because if you have the whitelisting, it doesn't matter if the application is ring-fenced or how the payload is delivered to you. The executable, the DLL, the script file isn't going to be able to run unless it's on the whitelist. But whitelisting won't stop them running PowerShell and using that against you. The second thing it's going to do is say, Zoom cannot access my file system. So if it does have a vulnerability, if there is an exploit, that it's not going to be able to go out to those systems. We can go further than this, and we can also restrict Zoom access to the internet. In that case, Zoom won't be able to go online, it won't be able to go out to the internet, except the Zoom's websites, which you can add in there, and are added in there automatically. So that's step one in ring fencing this application. Step two is make sure you do have whitelisting enabled, your computers aren't in monitor mode, and that you are blocking any untrusted software. Step three is, and this is not just about Zoom, but anything, you shouldn't be allowing your users to access storage devices that are not trusted. And in the storage control here, there's a few options on how you can do that. So one is the best way to do this, where you say users cannot access untrusted storage devices. So in my scenario here, I have a policy. I'm going to change my audit all policies to deny all. And what this is essentially going to do is deny all read and write to any devices that aren't approved before that. Now, if I want to restrict that to UNCs, I can come in here and restrict that to just UNCs. But outside of that, everything is going to be denied. So now, it doesn't, if it's not your file server, if it's not your trusted device, Zoom, Windows, users, nobody will be able to access it. Then secondly, I can go in here and I can add my trusted file servers in. I can put my file server in here. I can add the ones I trust, and I can add which applications are allowed to talk to that file server. So then nothing can open that isn't on that list. So if I go into my Zoom account now with these policies in place, and I'm going to end this meeting and reopen it so the ring fencing policies kick into place. Now, I will say while I was doing this as well, I was a little bit disappointed on some of the behavior of Zoom when I was just installing it on my virtual machine. I run Zoom every single day, it's a great product, but this is the first time I've actually ran it on my virtual machine where I'm logged in as a local admin. The virtual machine is just for demo purposes, for testing, for running tests like this, and I am logged in as a local admin. I have UAC enabled, so it does prompt me. And when I tried to run Zoom to begin with, the first thing it asked me to do was elevate. Now, I know Zoom doesn't need to elevate to run because I am not a local admin on my own machine, and I run Zoom all day long. But because I was a local admin, Zoom asked me to elevate. I said no, and it continued to run just fine. Here's why this is a problem. We have a vulnerability in Zoom here. It's not the end of the world. It's not great, and they need to do something to secure their system and make it better. But if I elevate and a product has a vulnerability, that product can now not only just access my files and my data and my documents, which is bad enough, but it can also get onto the kernel of my system. It can make changes to drivers, to systems. It can install keyboard loggers or affect other users that are using this computer. Frankly, there really was no reason for Zoom to prompt me to elevate. There was no reason that Zoom needs to elevate. And the fact it's asking just so it can embed itself further into my system is somewhat concerning in terms of their design philosophy. But that aside, now that we've put these policies in place, I'm going to send the same links again. I'm going to use the localhost link for my share, because I have my demo PC4 as allowed, and I'm going to send a test there just to break them up, and I'm going to send the same thing on calculator, which again is a permitted application on my system. And I'm going to go into here. Oh, this has broken that link. It's actually not very good at separating links, Zoom, so I'll send some text in between them. Oh, now I've got the whole hello in there. See, we'll not get rid of the... When I send that link again and I try and click on this, the file's denied, so it cannot read this file. It doesn't have permission to read this file. This, of course, stops my credentials being passed. It also stops me accidentally downloading or uploading data to untrusted shares. So that's the first thing you can do, and that's done by the storage policy. And you can see here in the audit, when I filter by what's being denied, we can see that Zoom tried to access their network share. It isn't trusted. So the next part of this is the execution of the program and the ability to open the links. And I'm going to actually have to turn that storage policy off because I'm using a loopback. I'm not even going to be able to try and execute the program. So I'm going to turn this policy back to permit for the moment and permit that. Go back into my meeting. I'll wait 30 seconds for that policy to apply. So now if I try and open Calculator on my local host, and Calculator may not be dangerous, but there are plenty of applications installed that are packaged with Windows that are dangerous. That application isn't opening. I'm just going to check it's actually trying. And we can see here in the action log that Calc was ring-fenced because Zoom isn't allowed to open Calculator. We have a ring-fencing policy for Zoom. It's not allowed to open untrusted applications. The bottom line of this is if your applications do not need the ability to spawn other applications, if they don't need to talk to Windows components, if they don't need to talk to Office components or other potentially weaponizable applications on your computer, just ring fence them. If we have suggested policies, great, but if we don't, you can just go in to the policy, change that action from permit to permit with ring fence and say, do not allow this to interact with any other applications except the below. If your application doesn't need to access your server, if you're playing games or running Zoom and it doesn't need to access your file server, just ring fence it so it can't. And if it doesn't need to go out to the internet, limit it so it can't go out to the internet. I can say here, I'm going to limit Zoom so the only website it can go onto on the internet is zoom.us. I'm going to say all ports. I assume it's port 443, but I'll say all ports. And then if Zoom tries to go somewhere else on the internet, it's not going to be able to. And I can very quickly look here to see what network traffic Zoom actually has and if I need to allow anything else. I can get the process name right. So Zoom apparently goes to zoom.us, and everything seems to be a zoom.us domain. Now by setting these boundaries around this application, we're saying it can't access our files, it can't launch other applications, and it can't go out onto the internet. We've really hardened and reduced the surface area of attack from this application being vulnerable. Once again, I'll wrap up by saying it's great that the MSPs, that companies are going out there, they're looking for attacks and they're trying to solve those problems. But looking for attacks isn't the only way you can protect yourself. It's far more effective if you take a bit of time now, look at the applications you're running, do not allow anything else to run. We make it really easy in Threat Locker. It really is simple to deploy and simple to manage. And the applications that you are allowing to run, do not let them do more than they need to do. Don't let them access your file shares. Don't let them talk to other applications on your system. Don't let them go out to the internet. It's very, very simple. Just check the box. We've added that built-in policy for Zoom. Hopefully everyone gets to benefit from it. If you have any questions, reach out to one of our cyber heroes, and thank you very much for your time.